started.
Yeah, so first off, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to say welcome to the TT Studios podcast station. I want to say we appreciate you. So today we have somebody that I believe is just a remarkable human being. Met her just last week, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was last week. But sitting down talking with you and just having these discussions, I've realized I had to get you into this podcast station and just talk about your journey. You guys that are listening, I'm telling you, this is a treat. This is going to be a great opportunity. This young lady is probably one of the most remarkable people I've met in the past 2 years, especially and once we talk about, I don't even know if we want to talk about your age because I don't think they'll believe it. But, to be part of this younger generation, and I think you're one of the minds that can push it through. So today we're going to be talking with a lady who is a self-published author, a writer, columnist. She is based out of Pittsburgh, PA, but she is a native to the New Yorker scene. And, she is a wealth of knowledge, traveled all around the country, all around the world. And we're going to talk about her journey, becoming an author and where she's at now and how she kind of got there. I want you guys to give it up for Miss Emma Riva. Hello.
Thank you so much, Corey.
So Emma. So, I tried to, I don't even know if I gave the introduction justice, you know what I mean? Because you do so many different things. And if you don't mind, just maybe telling the people, who you are and what's your title? What do you do in this beautiful world that we live in?
Yeah, so as Corey said, I'm Emma Riva. I'm an author. I view being an author as my full-time job, even if the world at large maybe doesn't see it that way. As well as being an author, I'm an art journalist, which means that I go around going to galleries, going to mural paintings, things like that, and writing coverage about the visual artists who are involved. And I mainly write for Up Magazine, which is an online and 3 times a year print magazine. It has both online and print content that chiefly writes about street art. So
that's absolutely amazing. So where did Up Magazine start? Where did that come from? That's not because we're in Pittsburgh, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that's something that's kind of native to
New York. New York. It's a Brooklyn-based company. I met the editor through a friend of mine, and we started working together. And it just kind of grew into a larger connection, and I just discovered that there was this whole field of writing I didn't know about that kind of tapped into my desire to partner with artists to involve multimedia stuff in my own career, because, I love writing. I love the craft of writing. I love everything that words can do, but also I think it's very limiting to just think of writing as the only art that's important.
Oh, I know that's right. And I think that's important, how art is connected, or creatives. I like to say creatives, right? Just in general. Art is so much more than just throwing, paint at a canvas. It is so much more than just sculpting clay. It's an aesthetic of your life.
Yeah.
It's writing, it's becoming a chef. I always say no one makes a peanut butter and jelly sandwich the way you do. You can have your parents cook a meal, and you can have your friends across the street. They can cook the same exact meal, and it tastes different.
Yeah, it depends on the person. Yeah. Everyone has their own voice. I really believe that. I went to high school with a lot of people who now work in business, and I always found it so confusing. I was always like, why would someone do that? Which I know is a very sort of artist way of thinking, but I got to thinking about it, and I was like, even if someone doesn't really see themselves as being creative, everybody creates. Having a child is creating. Everybody has some sort of creative spark in them, whether it's making a business or having a family. There's so many ways to create, not just art.
And definitely, and I feel like the voice is in everybody of a creative, right? It's just everybody has a different canvas. The canvases are different, and that's how I look at it. That's how I approach the world. And that when people tell me they're not an artist, I say you are highly mistaken, because you are. You have it in you. So Emma, let's take it back. Who is Emma Riva? You're from New York. What was it like being a child? What type of child were you?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Inwood, Washington Heights area of New York, northern Manhattan, which is it's sort of right where Manhattan kind of touches the Bronx. And
The Boogie Bronx. I want to give them a shout out real
the
quick.
Boogie Down Bronx.
Hello. All right.
Yeah, I love the Bronx. I went to high school in the Bronx, as I'll get into. But so as a kid, I was always kind of what you would call like a mature kid, and I came to kind of like resent that label a little more as I got older, because I was like, oh, I have to be mature. That's so much pressure, all of that. But I was just always someone who was really interested in talking to people regardless of their age, and I grew up in an international family, so my grandmother is from Switzerland, and I'm a dual citizen to Switzerland and the United States. So one of my earliest kind of memories is spending some time in Switzerland as a really little kid and experiencing that other culture.
So what was it like when you went to Switzerland? What was the big cult? Was there a culture shock? You know,
A little bit,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, I was like 2 years old, so I don't remember a whole lot. But it is a very different culture than the United States. Like it is in some ways a much more perfectionistic culture. I mean, if you know anything about Switzerland, you probably know like the World Economic Forum and stuff like that. Like, and that's where all the banking is and all of that, which was thinking about this recently. And I was like, even though obviously there's a lot of greed associated with that sort of financial world, I was like, if that kind of culture can have any impact on me, know your own worth. Like, do not sell yourself short because you think that it's humble to do that.
Right. And I feel like knowing your value that you bring into this world, right? There's a story. We're talking to an author here. I have a story on that. If you want, all right, so I'm gonna go into it. There's a story about a older gentleman. He was talking to his grandson. He had this dusty watch. And what he would do is he gave his grandson this watch, and he told him, take this watch and take it to the pawn shop, right? See what they'll give you for it. So he took it to the pawn shop, and the guy said, I'll give you $100 for it. So he brought it back to his grandfather. He said, take this watch, now take it to the jeweler. And he took it to the jeweler. It was like, he said, the jeweler said, I'll give you the weight in gold. It's $150. Now they took it back to his grandfather. Grandfather took it back, gave it to him, and said, take this watch and take it to the antique shop. He took the watch to the antique shop, right? And the guy at the antique shop looked at this kid, looked both ways, and locked the door and said, this is the most valuable watch that ever came into this door, and I will give you $250,000 for it. So the kid almost took the money, but he really, he took the watch back to his grandfather and said, they're going to give me $250,000 for it. And the moral of the story is, depending on where you go, if they don't understand your worth, you're not going to get what you deserve out of it. They're not going to give you what you deserve out of it. So it is so important to understand your worth. And I'm sorry to cut in with that.
No, that's okay. I've heard a version of that story about a car. I have not heard the watch iteration of it, but the one I heard, I think, was about taking a car to a used car lot.
Yeah. So Switzerland, that's where you kind of, you said you understand, like, know who you are, know what you bring, and act upon that same understanding.
And I think a big part of that kind of self-assurance that I've developed in life does come from an experience in another European country. When I was growing up, I lived in France for a short period of time because my father is a teacher, and he was working at School Year Abroad, which is a high school exchange program that has locations in a number of different countries. But we lived in Western France for a year.
How old were you?
I was 9. Yeah, I was 9 to 10. And we lived there for roughly a year. And I went to a French public school. I didn't really speak French at the time. I spoke a bit of Spanish because I grew up in Washington Heights. You kind of have to, but I didn't speak French, certainly not on a fluent level by any means.
And I think we're going to talk about this later in the podcast, how important that is to you, and how you actually approach learning those languages, because I think that's important too to grab onto.
Yeah, I mean, and living in France as a little kid, it just kind of taught me at a young age that, you have to be an advocate for yourself, and also that if you kind of develop an intuition for your own mind, the sky's the limit, because I was by myself in a country where almost nobody spoke English in a fluent way.
That must have been lonely.
Yeah, it was lonely, but it made me really creative, because I would write stories over email with one of my friends from the US. Like, we would send each other chapters of different stories. I would just kind of wander around and think. And I mean, I just think at that age, there's not a lot of opportunities for you to really sit with your own mind in the way that I did. And I know that at the time I was pretty unhappy in a lot of the situations. I would get bullied. I mean, I was in a completely different culture. Like as an American in France, like there's just a lot of things that are difficult to understand, especially as a child.
Yeah. Like what?
So in France, there's a lot more of a culture of physical bullying, which is like not as much a thing in most of the U.S. I mean, I think in the U.S. we have this idea of like, oh, like anti-bullying as being something that's, at least for my generation, that's in education really early. Like, don't bully. There's this kind of idea that this very black and white form of bullying is like a big no-no. But
Right.
in France, teachers will just kind of let physical bullying happen.
So we're not talking about like your mama jokes. We're actually talking about like
Like
physical,
yeah, like hitting each
like
other.
hitting
like
you.
I would witness people like getting into fights and stuff like that at the school that I went to, and I was like, why isn't anyone doing anything?
Oh,
But
they would just watch? Would they eat
yeah,
like eating
I mean,
popcorn or something?
as far as I know, unless someone got really hurt, people
Okay.
would just kind of stand by. And I mean, it was interesting because it exposed me to a different perspective on that, because when I got older I was like, well, maybe the reason why they do that is because they'd rather kids get it out then than start to take it out on each other when they're older in more harmful ways, which I hadn't really considered, because I mean in the US where like bullying is bad, full stop.
But also, I mean, you do something like that as a child, it probably becomes a normal thing, right?
Yeah.
You normalize it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I grew up like this, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna continue
yeah,
it
for sure.
throughout the world. I mean, throughout my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
So seeing something like that, right? It can deter you from talking with other children.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't speak fluently the language
Yeah.
that you speak, and two, I don't know if you're dangerous or not. Would you be secluded in those areas? And you said you kind of sat with yourself. You weren't really
Yeah.
like
I did
inclusive?
have some friends, and eventually I had some friends who were like native francophones as well. Like I did have friends who didn't really speak English at all, and but for the most part I like did sit with myself, and also because I was there not as someone who lived there full time, I would sometimes miss some school because I would like go somewhere with my dad or something like that. We would go to southern France, or we went to Paris at one point. We would go to just various other parts of
Now,
the
was it just you and
province.
your father, or were you your only child? or-
No, it was me, my sister, my mom, and my dad.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were all there together. My sister was quite a bit younger than I was. So my sister was
Right.
in the French equivalent of kindergarten.
Now, see, when I was younger, I moved around a lot.
Yeah.
But actually, I found out it was very beneficial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're always the new person. So you always have to understand the environment. You always have to, see where everyone's at. It's a different culture.
Yeah.
But there's a thing that happens where you end up being able to talk to all sorts of different people.
Yeah.
And really be able to, approach the world a little different. I feel like the best connectors are people that can create the connections, and people, or somebody who's experienced different cultures young.
Yeah.
Just seem to have a grander sense of just what the world's about. So it's really interesting that your journey. So let's go from Swiss. Let's go from there. You went to Switzerland, came back to America.
Yeah, I
afterwards?
came back from France when I was 10. Yeah.
Okay. And then we back to the Bronx. Is this
Back to Washington Heights. Yeah, I'm back to school in the Bronx.
okay?
Yeah.
So you took those experiences and took it back to the Bronx. Now, what was it like coming back home? Were you happy, or?
It was weird. I mean, I remember just feeling like I knew something everybody else didn't, and it was weird. Like I went to a school where there was a lot of like generational wealth and stuff like that. So there were people who maybe had traveled a lot around the world but didn't really know what it was like to live in another country, and maybe just weren't really interested in that perspective, because if you have access to anywhere via your private jet, you're not really going to be interested in the individual experiences of people that live in any other country.
Right, because there's a tourist effect, right?
Yeah.
There's like, I've seen the pretty things, but they haven't traveled the other streets, the other avenues.
Yeah, you haven't lived there in a way that's authentic.
Something you said was very common from a lot of people who go to South America or third world countries when they come back. It's weird because it's like you do know something everybody else doesn't realize. You've seen like real poverty. You've seen real struggles, or you've seen there's a whole different world. I think we get enclosed in this whole caption of America that the whole world is like where we live.
Yeah.
And it's completely false. It's 100% false.
I think for me, going to Europe, I mean, obviously is a little different than going to South America, but the thing that really put things in perspective for me is just how much older everything is in Europe. Like America is only like,
It's just because you're young.
I mean, America is only like 200 something years old. Like it's not old, but in Europe or like by extension in Asia, which I also went to a little later in life, there's stuff that is like thousands and thousands of years old, older than you can ever imagine even like being alive or anything like that.
And I want to talk about it a little bit later, how those things have trickled through your writing.
Oh yeah.
Because you seem to travel in different areas. Like a lot of people who write, they write about what, the place they're in.
Yeah.
Where it seems like the story that you have authored have seemed to bounce all around.
Yeah.
To different areas, and it's just it's really cool to see maybe where that seed was planted.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, my book that came out recently is about somewhere I have never actually been.
I love it. I love it.
I will write about places I haven't been before, and in order to make it authentic, I will look the places up on Google Maps and like do the little like person walking around on Google Maps, because I don't know, I want to see what it's actually like to be there. And my recent book, and I apologize to anyone who's from this town if I'm about to mispronounce the name of the place where you live. Like, send me a mean message on Instagram. Like, I will not be offended. But it's a town called Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if it's Tamaqua or Tamaqua or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're from Tamaqua, DM me. I'd like to know. But it's this town called Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, that I have not been to before, and I just kind of picked it at random because someone I was friends with on Facebook lived there and would post about it occasionally. And I was like,
friend on Facebook.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. It's a whole book because of your post. Hello.
Yeah, I was just like, that seems like a kind of interesting place, because I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, but sort of the plot of the novel is about this girl who works at a 24-hour diner and this guy who's a Postmates delivery guy. And so I was trying to find a place that was not a big city, because I think a 24-hour diner doesn't necessarily thrive in a big city, but wasn't such a small area that there'd be no Postmates. So I just sort of landed on that. And weirdly, I came up with this idea before I lived in Pennsylvania.
Seriously?
Yeah, I did not live in Pennsylvania when I wrote this book.
Okay, well that's absolutely, maybe that's what brought you here.
Maybe, yeah.
So let's stay on it. That. Let's talk about the book, right? Self-published.
Yeah.
Right. So what was the whole process like? What's your process when you actually like clamp down on the idea, this saying, you know what, this is what I want to write a story on.
Yeah, so
how did this
the
come
story
about?
of Night Shift in Tamaqua is actually quite interesting. So I didn't come up with the idea by myself. I came up with the idea with a very, very good friend of mine, the painter Coyote Jacobs, who he's on Instagram at coyote_illustration.
But he did the work on the cover?
He did the cover, he did the illustrations.
Goodness. Yeah,
in the book.
I love that.
Yeah, he's excellent. He and I actually lived together for a period of time, so we became very close friends. And at one point we were driving around where his family lives in Schenectady, New York, and we were just talking about, we should do a collaboration, like what kinds of things are we both interested in? And so we sort of started thinking, he was like, I'm interested in kind of like genuine love stories where there's kind of a real like earnest love between people. And I was like, I'm interested in kind of writing about work and writing about how in contemporary life work kind of rules so many aspects of our existence, but at the same time, like, we have to be alive and be human at the same time. And so we kind of came up with these characters, Lance and Ellen, who are the protagonists of the book, they're in their 20s, I believe. I'm gonna embarrass myself by not remembering the plot of my own book, but I believe they're.
We got you.
I believe they're like 23 and 24, the characters, and they both kind of are in unusual situations in that Ellen didn't finish high school and Lance went to some college, then didn't finish, then went back to college, and then sort of started doing online
Ooh,
school.
let's not give them everything.
Yeah.
They're going to have to read this.
Yeah,
this
you'd have to
is
read the book to get it all.
I literally had, because you just gifted me. Well, I ended up purchasing the book,
Yeah.
and then you actually signed the book for me.
Oh yeah.
So this happened 2 days ago, and I actually was sitting down there. I was with another artist, a friend of mine. We're doing a fundraiser together, and she read the back of the book, and literally, I mean, I had it out for maybe 10 minutes, and she was like, "Oh, I'm taking this with me. I'll bring it back." I said, "No, you're not. No, you're not. Emma's coming down. She's going to sign it." This was before you actually came and actually signed it, but I was like, I had it on the table, and she's seen it. I was like,
Yeah.
I've never. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've never read a fiction book. This has really got me intrigued though, because I've worked night shift. I was a security guard, and I know there was something about the character that it just grabbed onto me when I read just the bio of the story.
Yeah.
It was just I was like, you know what, this seems interesting, and it just seems interesting, you know. So let's talk. How long was that process? Like how long was it from the beginning of just thinking about collaborating to the tail end and publishing, and what was that journey like?
So the publishing also has a kind of a collaborative origin story, because I had written this manuscript. It took me maybe about a little under a year to write a couple of drafts of the manuscript. I'm
sorry about that. Let's talk about that. Just the manuscript, right?
Sure.
So that process, and we'll start there and kind of go forward. So, approaching a manuscript, you said it took you a year and a half.
A little under a year.
Under a year.
Yeah.
So how many would you write?
Like of drafts?
Yeah, drafts.
I think there were maybe 4 of this particular book, and this one I took my time on. I actually usually write much faster than that, just because that's how my brain works. But this one I tried to take my time on, and there were certain points where I would get stuck. I would find something to change. I would change that. Then the book would open up. Then I would just start working on it again. And I went through a period where I would write almost every day on it. And I think that was finishing the first draft, if I'm remembering right. And then then I sort of went through and edited it. I sent it to a friend of mine who did the blurb for the book, actually, my good friend Aurora Dimitri, who is also a self-published author.
So you said blurb for the book.
She did the little review. She's also someone who I 100% plug. Her writing is amazing. She's very, very prolific. I believe she has 15 books self-published right now.
How long?
And she and I have been friends for years. She lives in Jamestown, North Dakota, and she writes about the
North
Midwest.
Dakota, so she has some time on her hands as well. So it's a beautiful. I heard some great stories about that. There's besides the snow. The snow was horrible up there.
I've been there. She and I actually met online originally. We met on a fan fiction forum, and then as an adult, I went to go visit her. So I have been to North Dakota, and I went in January. So I have seen that winter. That is treacherous. It's very cold, but it is incredibly beautiful in North Dakota. I recommend it if you just want to see some like beautiful austere landscape. It's something similar to kind of what I like about the like Appalachian Pittsburgh landscape. It has this like austere quality to it that is really inspiring.
Well, shout out to North Dakota. I never thought I was going to ever say
shout
that.
Out to North Dakota.
Shout out to North
sure.
Dakota.
Yeah.
That manuscript, right? When you're writing it. Now, I heard in a masterclass from Malcolm Gladwell, he said, while writing a book, it's important sometimes to, people get caught up in the beginning, right, when you're writing something. But if you know exactly where the destination is, it becomes easier to write, So he says, maybe have an idea of what the first chapter is going to end like, and then you can approach it that way. Did you approach it that way, or do you kind of write, you just let it come to you and you just continue to go, or do you know your destination?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the project. I tend to fall a little bit more into the first camp of you write and then see what happens, particularly with this book, because it's about a relationship rather than about an action-based plot. I just kind of let it happen because, like, in real life, you'd let a relationship just organically happen.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I just let it organically develop because I wanted the characters to have an organic relationship with each other.
I think it's important because, Malcolm said that, but, and I grabbed onto it and I thought it would be great. Maybe for nonfiction, that's beautiful, right? But anyway, it's like when I'm doing art, it's kind of hard for me to have an idea of where I want to end.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to, just become like, just be active and it'll come to you while you're in the process. So it's really cool to understand that writing can work that same way, and I think that keeps it fun.
Yeah, it keeps it fresh.
Yeah, it looks like you're living it. Like maybe that interaction between it, instead of knowing, okay, I need to get here, let's find a way to. I mean, there's different approaches, million ways to skin that cat.
Yeah. The project I'm working, or that I just finished working on the first draft of right now, I mean, I did sort of an extreme version of that where I really had no idea what was going to happen in that book. I was just like, I have an idea from the beginning. Yeah, it's going to turn out some way. It did. I felt like I wanted to get started on something. I lined it up with National Novel Writing Month. It wasn't really on the same schedule because I wrote a lot in a single day at certain points and things like that. But for this project that I just finished a draft of, it just poured out of me. I had never written that quickly before, and I think part of it was. Yeah, I think part of it was living in Pittsburgh. I find Pittsburgh to be an incredibly inspiring and rich place. Like there's just a lot of interesting landscape, interesting history. Like also part of it I think is just like, I lived in New York for quite a long time. It was like from my birth to when I finished college, if you don't count living in Europe. It's a wonderful place. It's got a lot to offer, particularly if you're an artist, but it is very, very stressful.
Okay.
Like it's an overwhelming environment, and part of the fun is the overwhelming nature. But after having lived there for almost the entire time I'd been alive, I think something just kind of opened up in me when I moved to Pennsylvania, because it's a really different natural landscape and a really different social world as well. And this book that I just finished, it is set in Pittsburgh in the 1980s, and it I had a lot of fun.
You went for the 80s?
Yeah, I went for the 80s.
We're talking Boy George. We're talking retro music. We're
talking, if it was a movie there, I'm sure there would be how every movie set in the 80s has Sweet Dreams Are Made of This in the trailer.
Rique Suave. No, I think that was the early 90s. But yeah, that's absolutely dope.
Yeah.
But I do want to finish
the publishing thing. Yeah, we can finish that story first.
Yeah, the manuscript. So after you get done with the manuscript, I can't wait to get to the 80s. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this, guys. So you get done with the manuscript, right?
Yeah.
And where do you go after that?
Mm-hmm. So after the manuscript, I actually originally I didn't really have any intention of self-publishing this book. I didn't really have my foot in the self-publishing world until relatively recently. But so I was working as an art journalist, and I took some time off from working at Up near the end of college because I had a lot on my plate. And then I went back to working with Up, and I started doing some stories about this gallery in New York called One Art Space. And so One Art Space is it's an art gallery, and they have a really big variety of shows and events there. And I covered a show that was all about artists from Venezuela there. I covered a show that was about these graffiti artists, the boys from the Heights, who I'm still very good friends with now. And I just became very close with the curators there because I had done a lot of work for them. And we had a release party for the 4th print issue of Up magazine there, and I got to talking with Diego Ponce, who's one of the curators at One Art Space, and he was like, we should do a book launch for you at this gallery. And I was like, well, I haven't published a book. I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books I could publish, but I haven't published one. He was like,
how many you got on the shelf right now?
On the shelf? Oh, geez. I think maybe 5 or 6. Only maybe 4 of them are publishable.
You can't say only and then you have 4 books sitting on the shelf ready. Okay, so only 4 of them are publishable?
Because some of them I wrote when I was 15. But
okay.
But yeah, I got to talking to Diego, and Diego was like, you should self-publish it. We can help you with the marketing. We can sort of help this as a launch for your career.
Was it scary?
It was scary. Yeah, I was like...
Those are the emotions that we like to tap on, because a lot of people, the biggest problem is taking that initial jump.
Yeah, I was really, really scared. You can You can ask my boyfriend, like the week before my book launch, could not sleep.
You seem so calm. So
Yeah.
to have you like riled up, I don't want to see it, but I think it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So what do you like when those feelings are overwhelming? You know, what happens to you and how did you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, when I feel overwhelmed, a lot of the times I turn to the gym because it's a place where like you don't have to talk about your feelings.
Is it the punching bag?
Not the punching bag.
Okay,
I usually do.
So it's the calm ones I worry about.
Yeah,
So.
I usually will do like I'll do some like deadlifting or I'll go on the treadmill or something, just like something that like.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm like a feminine looking woman, but I'm actually very strong. I was a competitive fencer for like 5 years. Like,
serious?
do not fuck with me.
Oh, okay, yeah. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'm about to say, all right, that's a whole different realm, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to get to that part. We're not going to just let that just slide.
Yeah, it's
We're not letting
one
that
of the
slide.
like things that I like to bring into conversation, and people are like, "What?"
So you're competitive.
Deep down, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I actually remember a conversation with my dad when I was applying to college, like some years ago. Like I had just been at a campus tour of Vassar, which, as you know, is a pretty competitive university. And I didn't really like it very much. Like the admissions officer, I felt was really rude. I was like, this is competitive in a way that was not. I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was conducive to being smart. No offense if you went to Vassar,
Okay.
but
Burn. No,
yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm playing.
Yeah.
We love you guys.
Yeah. Shout out Poughkeepsie and Vassar. But I really didn't like it there, and I remember telling my dad, I don't think I'm competitive. But I was like, I'm someone I don't enjoy like competing with other people. It's not my thing. But then I realized I think I was talking about something. Maybe I was talking about fencing. Maybe I was talking about writing. And my dad was like, "You are competitive. What are you talking about?" Like it's I'm someone who I would describe myself more as being driven than competitive.
I think that's a better approach. Being competitive is part of it, right? But it's not. I want to beat you, but hold up, I want to see what I'm like at that level. I know I have a target. I'm aiming at you because that's where I would want to. That level is where I want to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Then it becomes like. I think in art, and I'm just going to take it back. First we try to emulate, and then we have to lead, because it has to be bigger than what you see. You're creating. It's like, and there's that driven. It's one thing. Motivation comes and goes. It's fickle.
Yeah.
But when you become driven, becomes who you are.
Yeah.
And it's accepting that, like, this is who I am, and I'm living this to the fullest. And that burns a fire in you. And for some reason, you just got me, like, you lit my palate with that one. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, fencing, fencing was a huge part of my life. My first relationship was through fencing. The first person I fell in love with was also a fencer. It was how I made a lot of friends that I'm still friends with now.
Did you stab him when it didn't work out? Is that what happened? No,
Sadly, no.
Okay.
But he continued fencing through college. I believe is an NCAA athlete now. But I did not do that because I went to an art school. And we didn't do that kind of thing.
Somebody didn't like you, like on guard. You know what I mean? I'm just absolutely amazing. You are such a phenomenal person. Let's put that out there. So if we keep jumping over the publisher.
Yeah. Well, we can get back to that. So,
but this is fun. Yeah.
So I'll condense the story a little bit.
No, don't, please don't. Yeah. Let's give us everything.
So Diego pitched this idea to me, and I ran with it. I called up CJ. His like artist name is Coyote Jacobs. I call him CJ, sort of what his friends call him. I called up CJ. I was like, look, I want to actually publish this book. Can you sort of produce the rest of the paintings? Because we sort of had some sketch ideas. We had some stuff that wasn't that concrete. And so I told him, like, I will pay you what I can, and we will be creative partners on this. And so we did that together. I cleaned up the book. That was the point when I sent it to Aurora to look over, because I was like, if I actually print this, I want to make sure it's not like it's not riddled with typos and stuff like that.
Typos, right?
Actually, like
how many did you have when they sent it back?
I'm not sure, but I know that in the actual manuscript there are some, because I got a text from one of my family members, and this will tell you something about the kind of like. This is the Swiss side of my family. It will tell you something about the kind of family that I come from. My aunt texted me and was like, I put Post-it notes in all of the typos in your book, and I'll give it to you next time I see you.
Shout out to Auntie out there. Yeah, shout out to Auntie
like,
in Switzerland.
She's in the U.S., but it's from my Swiss side of my family, and
hello.
I appreciated that. I haven't actually gotten that yet.
But did you really appreciate it?
I did. I mean, it's like, you know, I love my aunt. And I think that anyone who's pushing me to get better.
Oh, I'm with it. There's a difference between like criticism and feedback.
Yeah, like anyone who's, because also, I mean, the thing is, self-publishing, no matter how good I make it, it's not a professional traditional publisher looking at it. So that's something I've just kind of lived with, and I'm okay with the book being imperfect. I designed the book myself too, and I look at the design sometimes and I'm like, oh my God.
You're more than an author.
Yeah.
You're more than an author.
I used to work as a book designer at a company called Uptown Stories, and so I have the skills to do Adobe InDesign design, and so I did that on my own book. But as anyone who's worked in InDesign knows, it is a very difficult program, and there's certain pages in the book where I'm like, that margin is not lined up, and I'm just okay with it because there's nothing I can do about it now.
But see, that's why I'm so intrigued with your generation, right? It used to be, I do this, I find somebody that can do this and do that, or it doesn't happen. You guys, oh no, you make it happen, and even if I have to do everything, and that right there to me has sparked something in the older generation to realize we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for all the stars that align. We can be, if you're driven, you'll make it happen. And it's so great to have passion and perseverance. I think when you put both of those together, you get grit.
Yeah, totally.
You got grit, girl.
Yeah.
You got grit, lady. I'm telling you.
And there's a book called Grit, isn't there? That's like about like being driven. I don't remember the author.
I believe the author was also from New York. She was a teacher.
Really?
Yeah. That's where she did a TED Talk. I can't think of a name.
When I think grit, also I think of True Grit, which is a completely different subject matter.
Oh God.
That's the like.
We're gonna leave that out there. No,
that's the Western book about the girl who lives on the frontier or something like that.
Hello.
Yeah. But yeah, so on the like tail end of self-publishing it, I had Aurora look it over, and then I had to order all these books for the event, and there was this whole stressful thing about the books not coming on time. I actually had to Amazon Prime them to myself because instead of
was it COVID time too?
Was COVID? I mean, yeah, it was 2021. So
we were still kind of in the grasp of
it was just like
19.
I self-published through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, which is sort of the most direct route to self-publishing that's out there. And they do this thing where you can order author copies, which are at printing costs, but they take some time to make because they're printing them. And they weren't going to get there in time for the event. So I just had to buy maybe it was like 30 copies of my own book at like retail costs. I was just like, okay, sure. But I sold a fair amount of them. I actually do not remember how much I sold at that event, but that's we'll just say I sold a lot.
Did you get your initial investment back, or?
I think so. I think over time I did, because combined through sales on Amazon, sales that sort of were through Venmo, and because I had copies left over from the event, people would order them from me personally, would Venmo me with the cost plus shipping, then I would send it to them in the mail. And so with that combined from Amazon sales and all of that, I think I did make my initial investment back, but it was very stressful investing that much time and money into it. And I had another author who did a interview panel with me there. One of my professors from college, the author David Bergerard.
What's the interview panel? I'm sorry.
He just talked to me about the book and stuff like that. It was I guess an interview would be a more accurate term than a panel because it was only me. Okay. It went well, but it was stressful trying to find someone for that. And I mean, one of the hardest things I think as a creative person is getting other people involved in your process.
Ooh, letting them in? You mean
letting them in, but also just asking people for stuff,
right? Which is important.
Yeah, I mean it's very important, but it's difficult. I mean, especially
what are the common difficulties that you go through?
I mean, especially as a self-published author, it's you don't have Random House behind you vetting your work, so you only really have. The other person really only has your word that your work is worth their investment. And it is stressful kind of be representing yourself only as yourself.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is your primary goal to get with one of these bigger publishers, or do you feel like, you know what, I think I'm gonna do it this way?
I mean, I would like to have an agent, which if there's any agents listening to this, like hit me up. I would love to talk to you.
Don't forget to drop that handle.
Yeah, drop that handle at M with glasses on Instagram.
Hello.
But yeah, I would like to have a literary agent so I can at least navigate these financial situations with someone who's more experienced than I am, because I'm a good writer. I believe that about myself, but I am not someone who knows a lot about the publishing industry, and I don't necessarily need Random House to buy my work, but I would like to have a little bit more, I guess you would say, credibility. And so I would like to maybe break into that, but I also do really believe that the publishing industry is kind of sinking. So as authors, we need to self-advocate. Like, we need to be able to talk about our own work, be secure in our own work, and also just have a network of creative people in our lives, because those are the people that are going to support us ultimately, not the big publishing houses that are really corporatizing your work. And I think that's part of the reason why I did a novel with illustrations. It's part of why I had a launch at an art gallery. It's part of why I love what you're doing here at Atiti too, because I think that these like corporate entities are not the things that are going to help us out when we need it. I mean, they're good for getting your foot in the door, and I would be lying if I said I didn't want to like walk into Barnes and Noble and see like a giant stack of my own books. But it's a balance.
Yeah, I believe with every fiber of my being, one day I'm going to walk into Barnes and Noble and I'm going to see Emma Riva.
Yeah, I love that image.
I just got chills when I said it, but I truly believe that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
right now you can walk into Riverstone Books or Caliban Bookstore and see Emma Riva, but there's only like 2 or 3 copies.
You know what? I mean, I don't want to put it out there yet. There might be a few more in Pittsburgh that we'll be able to find too.
Yeah,
so you guys keep posted, and please follow at Emma with Glasses on Instagram. And I'm telling you guys, keep up with this young lady. She is I don't know if you're going to be able to grab her in a few years, because she's going to be out there. You know, I can see you over in UK doing book signings. I see you going pretty. I think the sky is not the limit. You might be able to go to Jupiter. You know?
I love that.
Hello.
Yeah, you know? I'd love that to promote my book in space.
Yeah, I think that'll be great. You'll be an intergalactic author.
That would be awesome.
Come on, we got to tag that. So we got through the whole process of publishing,
of self-publishing
your book.
Yeah.
And so, what's next for Emma? What's the new book? How are you approaching this? Even if you're looking back at one of those books that were on the shelf, we as artists, as creators, we know the product is hard to ever understand if it's finished or not. And sometimes you go back to go forward, or you have to gain more experiences to really shape it out. Which one is shaping out a little bit more for you now, and you think it's going to be your next release?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned going back to go forward, because with this recent project, that's exactly what I did. So when I was in high school, I did an independent study program my last year of high school. My high school had this thing where you could work with a faculty member individually and sort of do a project of your choosing. And I worked with Geraldine Woods, who was retired from teaching at the time, and is an editor, author of a book called 25 Greatest Sentences. I'm sorry, Jerry, if I don't remember the title of your book, but
you're the greatest, Jerry. We love you.
Yeah, but she was it was called Having a Mentor. She was my mentor for this project, which was a book about this young woman growing up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn in 1977, and relationship that she had with her best friend, this sort of emotionally a little bit unavailable guy who moved away to Trenton, New Jersey, and sort of didn't tell her why. And that book I had a lot of fun with it. I was really passionate about it. It took place during the blackout of 1977, which is a really interesting time to write about. But I was thinking about it recently, and I was like, I love this book, but it was also written by an 18-year-old, and but the thing is, like, it was written at a different time in my life, when I think, you know, I'm not a YA author, like, at this point in my life, and I don't have the same feelings and values that I did when I was a teenager. And but I was like, I love these characters and I love their relationship, and I think it's so I don't know, it's something that has a lot of poignance and meaning for me even as an adult. So I was like, how do I write a new book about these characters? And I started thinking, what would happen to them when they're older? What kind of plot could I come up with? And I wanted to write about Pittsburgh. So the book that I just finished a draft of right now, the title is The Venus of Appalachia, and it's about this woman. Her name is Evangeline. She goes by Evan, but with her best friend, this guy named Casey. Her name is Evangeline. She is marrying into this wealthy family in Pittsburgh in the 1980s, and she grew up sort of working class and is kind of navigating this difficult social dynamic of like marrying into a family that's much wealthier than she grew up.
Ooh,
and
okay.
at the time she's trying to come up with people to invite to her upcoming wedding, and her fiance is like, oh, you should try to reconnect with some of your friends from Brooklyn. And that sort of sparks the idea in her head of reconnecting with her friend Casey, who she definitely has unresolved feelings for, who she kind of lost touch with for that reason. And they end up reconnecting. He comes to Pittsburgh, and it quickly begins to cause problems.
Okay. Ooh. Have you ever? Okay. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about writing scripts?
No,
Like,
I haven't. I tend to be a pretty descriptive writer, and that's kind of why I've shied away from writing scripts, because it's more dialogue based.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Quentin Tarantino was more dialogue based
That's
as
true.
well.
Yeah.
The way that you. Oh my goodness! I'm following that story. Like I'm reading that.
Yeah,
Like I'm
it's,
reading that.
it's-
Like it excites me, and just to hear something, to hear the passion behind your voice.
Yeah.
It really draws me to your stories. Just you talking about it just makes me just want to like.
Yeah.
Oh, I want that in my on my shelf.
If anybody listening is familiar with like Michael Chabon, his book The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, I'm coming for Michael Chabon as the Pittsburgh writer. No shade to Michael Chabon, but I want his title as like the local Pittsburgh writer.
There goes that competitiveness,
Yeah,
the fencing
exactly,
just came out of you,
yeah.
and but that's good. That's good. You have something to grab for, right? That's beautiful. Now I've heard to become a good writer, you have to become a good reader. Right? Mm-hmm. How many books are you reading a month?
A month? It depends on the month. I would say maybe 3, 4, but like it really depends on the length of the book and the busyness of that month.
Well,
but,
let me ask you another
yeah.
question. Let's go a little deeper. How much do you read a day?
A day? I don't know, maybe.
What portion of your day is kind of like dedicated?
I try to read before bed a lot of the times. I mean, I'm not as great about this as I would like to be, but I find I have trouble sleeping if I'm like on my computer too much before bed. So I try to read a little bit before bed usually. So I don't know. If it's a really engaging book, I can read maybe like 10-ish, 10, 20 pages. I mean, I'm a really fast reader is the thing. I if I really like a book, I can read the whole thing in like a day. It depends on if it's a book that's like under 500 pages, I would say.
Well, this is something else I want to talk to you about, because see, I was dyslexic. I still am, but I fought my way through it. And now I can actually, take something in. But when I was reading, when I was really learning how to really put those words together, it seemed a lot of authors didn't take in mind the idea of, a new reader reading
Mm-hmm.
your work, right? Where these words were, 5 syllables in a word, and you expect me to really take that in, as well as, it was just very complicated for me to grab onto something. Now, I know your writing seems to be more so very descriptive, very diverse in all concepts and everything like that, but it is a very easy read as well, so how, like, do you think about maybe not using certain words, or do you like, I'm not too sure, do you like, I think some people like to write, I think one of my favorite authors again likes to write at a 8th grade level, but maybe with a master degree type of information in it, but like anybody can understand. Do you approach it the same way, or?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit off mic, but the author that I think inspires my work the most is Stephen King, which is, like if you read my work, you're not going to be like, oh, that reminds me of Stephen King, because the subject matter is very different. But I approach, I think, character in a similar way, where I want to write about people who are real and people who experience time in a real way. Something I actually have a lot of trouble with in my writing is how to use time jumps and things like that, because I tend to write in very real time, because I want to write in a way that's accessible. Like I want to write in a way that people will understand and will like have an easy time following. So when to use time jumps for stylistic purposes is something that I struggle with a little bit in my writing process. But to answer your question about words, I just try to think how would this person really talk? Like,
oh, see, that's
like
beautiful. They say it's hard to write about how people talk instead of writing like actually. They said it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, well, both Night Shift in Tamaqua and this project I just finished, The Venus of Appalachia, are books that are told in dual perspective. So one chapter will be one character, the other chapter will be the other character, and that's something that is kind of, if you're a writer and you haven't tried it before, it's an interesting exercise in how to sort of develop a character's voice, because obviously you're writing both of them. Like both of them are you in some capacity, but you have to make them sound different because they're supposed to be different people.
Right.
So it's, some of it of course is situations, like the characters have different things happen to them and different experiences, but there are kind of different voices. And I mean,
well, that's beautiful, because we're talking about language, and language is so important to you, and you speak quite a few languages as well. So is that how you do your research? Is like, how do you, like you said, you have a book that's time zone is about the 80s, like a time that is taking place. Are you watching like old movies from the 80s, you know, and seeing actually what words they use so you can put them in there? Like, how do you research that?
Well, when I was in high school, I had a big phase where I was obsessed with the Brat Pack movies. So I have seen a lot of the movies from the 80s. Like I dressed up as Allison from the Breakfast Club, I think maybe 2 Halloweens in a row, because I just reused the costume. But I had a big phase where I was really into that culture, and so I think I have some vocabulary for that time period. But at the same time, the thing that's difficult about writing that time period, which is a big jump from Night Shift in Tamaqua, is very current. Like it's very much like people of my generation living now, whereas this other project, it's a big struggle, and I mean, this is gonna make me sound so like whiny millennial, but like it's a big struggle to write about a world where people aren't communicating via iPhone, because I grew up without that, but I wasn't an adult who was having adult relationships without that. Like I mean, like, because it's very different being a kid and like watching cassette tapes and stuff like that versus only having landline phones to communicate with as an adult. So something I'm a little self-conscious about in this project that I've been working on is, I'm like, do they spend too much time talking on the landline phone? Did people really talk on the phone that much?
Yes, we did. We did. Because that's a real thing.
Because I was like, because the amount of time that the average person now spends texting, you know, I was like, did people like talk on the phone that much?
I think you'll appreciate the fact that we like. I prefer someone to call me instead of text.
Me too, actually. For the most part,
I like just, if you got all this to say, it's gonna take me 10 minutes to type. It only takes 2 minutes to say. Like,
I also will send people voice messages a lot of the time, because especially, I don't know, if it's a friend that I know I'm having longer conversations with, I will typically send voice messages. Also, it's like, if you're outside, your hands are cold, you don't want to text, like just send a voice message. Like,
that just, you know, hopefully you guys are taking notes, especially if you got to contact me. Be better just to call. I give everybody my number. I said my line's always open. But, you know, it's important to also, you know, get with the times and make sure you can conversate the way people choose to conversate. If they're better at texting than talking, I don't know why, but if that is the case, case, then, you know, I'm gonna play on your field. You know, just to make sure that the connection happens.
Yeah, and I mean, in Night Shift at Tamaqua, the characters text a lot, and it was interesting to think about, so how do people's voices change when they text? Because that's completely something that happens. I mean,
that's deep.
I experience that myself. I mean, when I read my own text, I'm like, do I really sound like that? But it's interesting because people's styles when they text tell you a lot about them as a person. Like, do they use capital letters? Do they use like a lot of acronyms? You guys scare me. People that think like that scare me, and that's the reason why I tremble every time I have to send a text. I was like, I send it out and I'm like, yo, they're probably going to think, I'm not a great writer, and it does show. It's just authentic, but Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
like,
I had to
no,
justify
it's
the
okay.
fact I didn't use a period and I used like
No,
a
it's
question
fine.
mark.
It's fine. It's like, because
Yeah.
it doesn't tell you anything bad about Pierce. It just tells you a little bit about the way that they communicate. For example, in Night Shift in Tamaqua, the one I remember kind of trying to do to differentiate the two characters texting is the character Ellen. She doesn't use any capital letters, and she uses like I guess what you would call like a text-based emote a lot. Like she'll use the colon and then like the parenthesis rather than the Apple emoji where it's like that, the smiling face picture.
Wow.
This is kind of hard to describe if you're not seeing it in front of you, but people who grew up on the cusp of the AOL fanfiction.net generation and then the iPhone Gen Z generation will get what I'm talking about. That the colon, like punctuation mark emojis feel very different than the picture
I'm
emojis.
completely lost. I am completely lost. So I'm just gonna let you
Yeah.
keep going. There's somebody
Yeah.
out there that understands you, but they're not over the age of 35.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm so
No,
old.
no, it's okay.
Uh,
It's a weird thing,
Man.
and I mean, I was just interested in it when I was writing because I was like, I want to incorporate this because it's how people really communicate.
Yeah, and that's what intrigues me, right? That you're going that deep to make it authentic.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that work that you're putting in there, you know, it all trickles through. And we were going to talk about authentic, right? We were talking about
Yeah.
languages as well.
Yeah.
So when because you're learning Hebrew right now, correct?
Yeah. I am learning Hebrew. I enjoy learning languages because I think when we talked about this a bit a few days ago, I think that it exposes you to being bad at something in a way that is really valuable because, you know, if you're starting from scratch, it's particularly if it's a language that doesn't have roots in the one you already speak, it's you just have to like embrace the fact that you don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's so important to challenge yourself like that. I feel like the only place that growth actually happens is when you're uncomfortable. So you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to actually grow and to go forward. And it feels good to hear that coming, you know, from someone else. You know, it's anybody listening, I'm gonna have to break this wall real quick. Anybody listening, that right there is a gem. That's a gem. You know, you have to do things that you are not good at and become, you know, at a level where you're okay with and continue to do those things to really get somewhere you've never been. You have to do something you've never done.
Yeah.
You know, so, I'm sorry to break that wall real quick.
No, it's okay. Yeah, and also like, I don't know, this maybe sounds like I'm tooting my own horn a little bit, but but like, I know I come off like I'm someone who has a lot of life experiences, a lot of sort of accolades or whatever, but like, you know, I almost failed several classes in high school.
Hello.
When I got to college, I got dumped in a way that was incredibly brutal and like made me really depressed for quite some time. I come off very like self-assured, but I'm like anybody else. I've had like my share of experiences where I felt like just trash on the ground.
Right, and you know what? When those things happen, right? Because they're common, and you know people do hear people that are really assured of themselves, and they think, oh, they must always be like that. That's not the case. The fall happens to everyone. There's not a species or a creature on this world the fall doesn't happen to.
Yeah.
The important thing is what you do about it. That's where the win happens. That's where that's the difference between in good and great.
Yeah.
Right? Like the fall, I always tell my daughters, I say, look, yeah, the fall, that's common. That's the common thing. The uncommon thing is what you do about it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So as things like that would happen, how did you deal with it? And how did you overcome to say, you know what, let me go forward.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times, if it's like emotional fallout, I turn to writing because it's the way I kind of understand these things. But if it's just like failure, sometimes you just kind of have to take the L as you like. It's the specific instance I was thinking of in high school. Like I worked really hard to pull my grade up from like a D to a B minus in chemistry class, and then I got like an F on the final, and I got a C. And I was just like, you know,
Shout out to those C's because those C's will get you through there.
Yeah,
you don't always have to get an A to win.
Yeah,
you know
and I was just like, you know what, it is what it is. Like it's it's one of those things where I just kind of had to accept that failure, and I think that, or I don't even know if I would call it a failure. I had to accept that I wasn't naturally good at something.
Right. I don't think it's a failure unless you don't take anything from it. It's more, I think it's more, it's called an experience. Because I think success, and this is coming from another podcast I heard, guys probably heard this, but I think success and failure live on the same street and they borrow each other's shirts.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So it's important to knock on both doors, and you're going to have to. You can't knock on one door and not knock on the other, even though youngins don't know what it is to knock on doors these days. That was something we had to do back in the 90s. Back to my old man rant. But anyway, that was important. You know, you have to knock on each of those doors. You have to understand failure. You have to understand it well, and you got to be okay with it, because it's not really, it's all perspective. We call it failure, but it's really just an experience that is getting you closer to that intent, that desire, that destination that you're going for. Being okay with taking that C. Maybe one of the coolest gems that you've dropped so far. You've dropped some cool stuff, but that right there tells me a lot about, sometimes you got to take the L.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I went to a high pressure school, and a lot of the time people would freak out about getting an A-, and I was like, girl, I got F's and stuff in chemistry. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, let's talk about that school too, because there was somebody else in your household that was also at that school, right?
Yeah, my dad taught at the high school that I went to, and I think that was a really valuable experience actually, because it made me, I didn't fear authority. I was able to sort of see why people were in positions of authority and talk to them with respect, obviously, but on their level. And it also, it made me kind of watch my behavior in a way that, maybe kind of isolated me from my peers sometimes, but I think it made me a more successful adult. And I don't know, I'm incredibly grateful to my dad for giving me that opportunity.
Pops, you are absolutely amazing. Yeah. You got a real gem here. You did a great,
my dad's awesome.
And I'm gonna give that shout out to your family as a whole. Yeah. Because I think it takes a village to help mold someone like yourself. Because I feel like you would have been a problem with the mind that you have and not being able to help direct that energy. We would have had a super villain here. But we end up getting a superhero. So hello, Dad.
Yeah, my family. I am very lucky. I have a family that I have a fairly good relationship with now, even as an adult. And my parents definitely taught me to value like intellectualism, to value being open-minded, stuff like that. My mom is a Christian and my dad is an atheist, and they never disagreed about it in front of me. And I am really, really grateful to them for that, because they sort of taught me to be open-minded and taught me to accept all, or if not accept, like be open to all viewpoints and see the merits in everything, but also be skeptical of everything. And I think that has been a really like special thing in my life, to like never take anything at face value, but also be open to what anything could bring. And I think to connect that to the writing stuff, I don't know, I was obviously skeptical of self-publishing, but because I was like, people don't make any money doing that, which, is somewhat true. But at the same time, I was like, if I'm not open to this, I will regret it for the rest of my life.
Well, you know what, Emma? I think that note right there, what you just said, I think it's a perfect thing to end on. And I'm gonna tell you right now, you are going to sign this table that we have here. We have all the creatives that come on the podcast sign the table, but I'm going to let you know this as well. You will not be a one-time offender. You are going to have to commit this crime once again, and come back down here and slaughter this table again, because you are an absolute gem. And I know there's people listening today that are going to grab so much value out of this. Yeah. And I don't think we're done. I think we're just getting started with your story. And I'm telling you right now, these chapters that you're dropping on us of your life that's already happened, it's going to be a great read. Now, is there anything else that you want to tell the people that are listening? Is there some parting words that you have for them? Maybe something we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I'll tell you sort of where to find me. So you can visit my website. It's emmawithglasses.com if you want to learn a little bit more about me. There's a link to buy the book there in sort of the top header. You can also find me on Instagram if you want to open a conversation, want to just tell me you liked the podcast, want to ask me some questions about, I don't know, anything like being Swiss American, religion, my creative process, whatever. You can DM me at Emma with Glasses. and that's my Instagram. You can find my art journalism stuff on the Up magazine site. It'll be also on my website. It's pretty easy.
Shout out to Up Magazine.
Yeah.
You guys have a dope website as well. You put me onto that, so I've been navigating that all morning as well as this last
the people
week.
at Up Magazine are great, like very creative, entrepreneurial people. So that's worth checking out as well. And I would definitely also, I sort of plugged it already, but definitely check out Coyote Jacobs Illustration. His Instagram is at coyote_illustration. He is an incredibly genuine, kind, and also very driven in his own way. He's an animal rights activist, and he is someone who his dedication to his cause is something I respect from the bottom of my heart. And also my friend Aurora Dimitri, you can find her on Instagram at Aurora Dimitri. That's Dimitri with an E at the end, not an I. Yes, and my book is called Night Shift in Tamaqua. You can find it on Amazon. It's probably easiest to just find it via my Instagram or my website. But yeah, you can buy it on Amazon. Leave it a 5-star review. I will be very grateful to you if you do. And if you do buy it and you happen to live in the Pittsburgh area, or if you live in New York, please reach out to me. I will sign it for you. I will talk to you about it.
She will.
Yeah, I love talking about my work, as I'm sure you can tell from this over an hour long podcast. So just definitely open a conversation.
Hey, Emma, you are absolutely dope, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We can't wait to have you back, and just once again, want to say you are a gem. People like you keep people like us, give us the inspiration to go forward, because we know there's more of them like you out there, and it'd be great to just maybe be able to spark one of those minds using situation resources like this. So guys, have a great one. Thank you for listening, and we out. Hello. Goodbye.